In the golden era of Hollywood, MGM was packed with powerhouse male dancers. Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, Bobby Van, and the Nicholas brothers. And yet, when both Kelly and O'Connor were asked at different times in their lives who the best all-around dancer was, they named someone else. And that someone else is who we're talking about today on my podcast, Hey Dancer, and my weekly series, The Rest of the Story, where I go deep on the dancers whose stories deserve more space. If you're loving this series on dance legends, make sure you're following and subscribed wherever you're watching or listening. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new episode drops. And like, share, comment. Let's get these dance stories popping up in everyone's feed. And make sure you stick around through the end because I'll shed some light on a few things today's subject was brilliant at off the dance floor. Okay, let's get into it. He was born in Kansas City in December 1929, but raised in Seattle. His father, Edward, was said to have started as a sewing machine salesman and later ran his own business. His mother, Margaret, was a homemaker. He grew up with an adopted older brother named Jimmy. When he was 4, he was diagnosed with a crossed eye, and reading became a challenge. His mother worried, not just about school, but about what kind of life he'd be able to build if academics were always a struggle. So she enrolled him in a dance class. She didn't do it for the spotlight. She hoped it might give him a shot at a career that didn't rely so heavily on books. Some accounts say the condition was corrected through surgery. Others credit visual exercises. Either way, his eye was eventually corrected, but dance had already taken root. He was in too deep and too good to stop. The kind of good you don't brush off, the kind people remembered. He kept training, kept improving, and by the time he was 8, he was already performing in local vaudeville-style theaters in Seattle, where he started to develop the acrobatic skills that would later become a signature. And then, in the early 40s, the family moved to Los Angeles. He began taking tap lessons, and his teacher, recognizing his rhythm and raw ability, helped him land a spot at Universal Studios. That's where he joined the Jivin' Jacks and Jills, an energetic teenage dance group featured in a string of fast-paced wartime musicals. These weren't prestige pictures, but they were packed with music, movement, and big band numbers designed to lift spirits and sell tickets. He shared the screen with young stars like Gloria Jean, Peggy Ryan, Dan Daly, and Donald O'Connor, and danced in sequences with the Andrews Sisters, Woody Herman, and other marquee acts of the day. The movies were light, fast, and often thin on plot, but for a teenage dancer, they were a masterclass in how to perform for the camera. He was barely into his teens and already working regularly on sound stages, learning from professionals, and building real film experience. After his run with Universal, he kept training, but now the focus shifted. It wasn't just tap and acrobatics anymore. He began studying ballet and character work with some of the most respected teachers in Los Angeles: Adolph Bohm, Bronislava Nijinsky, and David Lachine, a former Ballet Russe dancer and choreographer known for bridging classical technique with theatrical flair. Lachine saw something in him, not just a film dancer, but a serious performer with range. So when Ballet Theater, the company that would later become American Ballet Theater, came through Los Angeles in 1944, Lachine recommended him for the touring company. He was 14, and just like that, this kid from Seattle, who'd spent the past few years spinning through Hollywood musicals, was now on the road with one of the most prestigious ballet companies in the country. Ballet theater wasn't just a company, it was training at the highest level. The schedule was grueling. 30 cities in 60 days, again and again, with dancers sleeping on trains, transforming upright seats into makeshift bunks, one all-night performances, constant travel, and no guarantee of job security. But for a young artist, it was a dream. He studied music on the road, carried art books in his bag, and still a teenager, he found himself dancing in works by Agnes de Mille and Antony Tudor, performing to scores by modern giants like Leonard Bernstein, who sometimes stood right there in the pit, conducting. The schedule was brutal, but the exposure to world-class choreographers, composers, conductors was the kind of education any artist would dream of, much less a teenager, and it shaped everything that came next. While on tour with Ballet Theater, the company made a stop in Los Angeles, and that is when it happened. He was rehearsing at Perry's Studios, the legendary space above Café Montmartre on Hollywood Boulevard, where everyone from Martha Graham to the Ballet Russe had passed through. In 1944, so did a teenage dancer on tour, and so did Jerome Robbins. Robbins was already choreographing for Ballet Theater, but he wasn't a household name yet, and he wasn't touring with the company full-time. So when they crossed paths in the hallway, the young dancer didn't recognize him. But Robbins stopped him and said, "I like your dancing. I'd like to work with you through the years." That moment stuck. Robbins had just choreographed a new ballet called Fancy Free, a bold, jazz-infused piece that felt distinctly American. One of the original dancers, Harold Lang, was leaving. Robbins needed a replacement. He asked, "Can you do a double air tour into a split?" The young dancer answered, "Sure," and did it right then and there. That was enough. Robbins told him to learn the role, and he did. Soon after, he was cast in Interplay, too, a fast, witty ballet that mixed classical steps with American street rhythm. Exactly the kind of movement this dancer loved. He later said, quote, "You don't see much of that kind of choreography anymore. I loved it," end quote. Robbins pushed for precision, down to the beat. "Hit the arms a touch earlier," he'd say, and this dancer could do it. Instantly. He had a knack for picking up and absorbing Robbins' choreography on the spot and dancing it back quick, sharp, musical, and clean. That mattered to Robbins a lot. And audiences noticed too. He was still just 16, dancing featured roles in two of Robbins' early high-profile ballets. And when Interplay opened at the Broadway Theater in New York in 1946, the New York Times took note. Critic John Martin wrote that he is, quote, "developing into a first-rate performer," end quote, and, quote, "came off with the lion's share of the honors," end quote. The raw talent was turning into something refined. But even at that level, ballet theater couldn't promise stability. Dancers were often laid off for weeks or months at a time. One day, Robbins made a different kind of offer. "Why don't you come do a musical?" So he did. In the spring of 1947, he dipped into musical theater with a revival of Louisiana Purchase on the West Coast. It wasn't Broadway, but it planted a seed. Soon after, he moved to New York, and over the next 5 years, he built a serious stage career, dancing in productions like Look Ma, I'm Dancin', Small Wonder, Miss Liberty, and Call Me Madam. Some were choreographed by Jerome Robbins, others by rising stars like Gower Champion. He wasn't just getting cast, he was standing out. Now he was singing, acting, dancing, and learning to command a stage. And during that run, he was also choreographing for the Faye Emerson Show, a live weekly television series that featured a different American city each episode. He'd create the choreography, perform it on air, then head straight to the theater to dance Act 2 of Call Me Madam. One of the audience members during those years? Gene Kelly. Kelly had first seen him in Fancy Free and again in Small Wonder. He could not forget this dancer. So in 1952, when it came time to cast his most personal film, Invitation to the Dance, Kelly reached out. It was an experimental 3-part musical told entirely through movement. No dialogue, just dance. In the second story, Ring Around the Rosie, our guy appears as the flashy boyfriend, tearing into a rhythm-driven solo and leading a group of men with bold, intricate footwork. Some critics called the sequence the most electric in the entire film. It was a whirlwind. Broadway 1 month, London sound stages the next, national television in between. But he was thriving. The kid who once danced to help his eyesight was now shaping full productions in musicals, on film, and on live TV. Then came the run that would define him on screen. He returned to Hollywood and in 1953 landed the role of Bill Calhoun in MGM's Kiss Me Kate. It was a dream project, a Cole Porter musical, a Technicolor spectacle, and a dual role that let him play both the brash gambler Calhoun and the Shakespearean Lucentio in the show within a show. He got to duet with Ann Miller in the sizzling rooftop number, Why Can't You Behave, showing off not just footwork, but chemistry, charm, and comic timing. And then came the number From This Moment On. Added to the film version, it wasn't in the Broadway show, the number became one of the most iconic sequences in MGM musical history. The staging was Elizabethan. The cast? Stacked. Bob Fosse, Janie Coyne, Carol Haney, Bobby Van, Ann Miller, and there he was, holding his own, dancing with Miller in a jazz ballet fusion that was equal parts athletic and elegant. His entrance alone was a showstopper, soaring in from high above the wings with aerial grace, landing soft as a feather, and launching straight into a duet that danced like a conversation. Critics took notice, so did choreographers, and he was just getting started. The next year, he was cast in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers as Frank Ponape, the fiery acrobatics 6th brother. It wasn't supposed to be a prestige picture. MGM had bet big on Brigadoon that year and considered 7 Brides a B-tier release, but the dancing changed everything. Choreographed by Michael Kidd and packed with a powerhouse ensemble, we're talking Russ Tamblyn, Matt Maddox, and Jacques D'Amboise, the film exploded with movement. The barn-raising scene alone required 3 weeks of rehearsal, dangerous plank work, and pinpoint accuracy. Miss a landing and you'd break something. He didn't miss. In fact, he shone, flipping, leaping, brawling, dancing with the kind of speed and strength that made audiences sit up, and he wasn't done yet. In 1955, Columbia cast him as Chick Clark in My Sister Eileen, opposite Janet Leigh and Bob Fosse. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it did give him a rare showcase, a challenge dance, choreographed by Fosse himself. The two play rival suitors, squaring off, trading steps, and pushing each other in rhythm and style. Fosse's choreography was tight, nuanced, stylized, and he nailed it. His leaps, pirouettes, and sharp accents adding a whole new layer to the scene. Years later, he'd say it was some of his best work on film. That same year, he signed a contract with Universal and starred in The Second Greatest Sex, a rural musical loosely based on Lysistrata. The film didn't make waves, but the barn dance sequence, filled with frenetic square dance energy, gave him room to show his genius. Then came Mary Andrew, another lively ensemble piece, this time at MGM, with Danny Kaye, choreography by Michael Kidd, and a joyful Johnny Mercer score. He played one of the trapeze artist brothers, diving into the physical comedy and acrobatic choreography that had become his signature. Then came the next chapter. As the Hollywood musical began to fade, he made a bold pivot. Back to Broadway. In 1959, he returned to the stage in Juno, a short-lived but artistically ambitious musical based on Sean O'Casey's Juno and the Paycock. He didn't sing a note, but Agnes DeMille crafted a 12-minute dance solo for him that some said stole the show. His role as Johnny Boyle, a wounded former rebel, let him act and move with rare dramatic weight. The show closed after just 2 weeks, but his performance earned him the prestigious Outer Critics Circle Award for Best Supporting Actor. 2 years later, he was back in a much brighter spotlight. In Milk and Honey, the Broadway debut of composer Jerry Herman, he played David, a young Israeli husband caught between love and homeland. This time he sang, he danced, and once again he stopped the show with a long solo choreographed by Donald Sadler. The title song and his duet, I Will Follow You, showcased a rich tenor voice most audiences had never heard from him before. But for him, the stage wasn't hitting like it once had. His next two musicals, Cafe Crown in 1964 and Cry for Us All in 1970, closed quickly despite strong talent involved. But he kept going. He appeared in cameos and character roles across a handful of films, often returning to dance. In Funny Girl, he played the prince in a ballet spoof of Swan Lake alongside Barbra Streisand. In Pennies from Heaven, he tapped his way through a vaudeville number with Steve Martin, executing an aerial cartwheel nearly 4 decades after his teenage film debut. And in Dancers, 1987, he shared the screen with Mikhail Baryshnikov, playing a former colleague from their fictional ballet past. He was never the loudest name on the marquee, never the most promoted. And to this day, people still ask why he wasn't more famous. Dancers, choreographers, film historians, anyone who really knows that era and the talent it took to thrive in it. Why someone that good, that handsome, that versatile, that consistently excellent, a true triple threat, didn't become a household name. That's in the stars and obviously impossible to answer. But all I can tell you, if there's one dancer I've been asked to cover more than anyone else for this series, by those watching like you, it's this guy. And that says something. Because talent like that doesn't disappear. It echoes in performances, in pedagogy, in the dancers who came after. What he brought to the screen and to the stage wasn't just steps, and it was more than his gift of technical mastery in endless styles of dance. It was storytelling, musicality, and flight. He danced like he could defy gravity, because sometimes he did. His name, Tommy Rall. And now you know the rest of the story. All right, dancers, before I get into a little non-dance stuff on this legendary guy, if you enjoyed getting to know Mr. Rall even 1/100th as much as I did doing my research on him, my God, you gotta do all the engagement things, okay? Like, comment, share with your dance fam, make sure you're subscribed or following, hit that notification bell so you are always immediately alerted as to when a new episode drops. I do put so much love and time into crafting each episode, so you showing up in this way, it goes a long way. Okay, so what set Tommy apart and what too few people know is just how much more he could do. He wasn't just a dancer. I hate to say just a dancer because that's everything, but he didn't only dance, he could sing and act. He was a dancer who could sing opera, and not just in passing. He studied seriously for years, and by the early 60s, he was performing with companies like the Opera Company of Boston, New York City Opera, and the American National Opera Company. Roles that demanded not just vocal power, but physicality. One in particular, the title role in, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Les Jongleurs de Notre Dame, called for dancing, singing, juggling, and acrobatics, and he delivered. That's not a musical theater tenor, okay? That's something else entirely. He also continued acting, appearing in dramatic roles in films like Walk the Proud Land and World in My Corner. And then just when you think that was enough, it turns out he was also a visual artist. I'm thinking right now of my past episode on Jeffrey Holder, who could just do endless talents, endless skills. Rall was a gifted painter who trained formally at Chouinard and the Arts Students League. His work even appeared in the book Actors as Artists. He lived a long life, a full one, quietly, without a lot of fanfare, but dancers like him just don't come around often, and they rarely do at all. Dancer, singer, acrobat, choreographer, actor, painter. Not loud, not flashy, just always excellent. I don't remember researching somebody where every single thing, even the New York Times, like the 1946 something or other review I read of the ballets he did with Robbins, that critic was really harsh on everybody, but not Rall. It's as if whenever he did something, he was going to be the standout, or at the very least get beautiful reviews. Not that it's about reviews, but I think that says something. He was just so consistently praised and deeply, unshakably committed to the art. He once said, quote, "You have to love music and dance because this business is so difficult. If you don't love the art and just want to be a star, then I think you're a dead duck. I don't think you could stand it otherwise," end quote. He didn't chase stardom. He chased mastery, and he caught it. And by the way, me saying earlier that people wonder why he wasn't more famous, it's not a commentary on my behalf, at least, that fame is better or worse, and that he should have been a thing that maybe he wasn't, like more of a household name. I personally believe that what is meant to be, and that he had his path in this lifetime, and it was a beautiful path, and there are obviously blessings and curses that come with being famous, and that ultimately it's about a life well lived. I just want to make that clear. It's not a commentary on fame being better or anything like that, you know? I think people just wonder when it comes to Rall because he was so damn talented. But as an artist myself, I have seen the most talented people on the planet never book a job. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason, you know, for so much of it. Anyway, am I rambling? Until next time, dance fam.